With you tonight. Great to see Jay and Chantel again. Y'all, I love your pastor. I know y'all love him a great deal as well. Jay was my only seminary friend, to be honest with you. I didn't have another, but whenever you have Jay as a friend, you don't need another because he has a million other friends. And so he was like my intro drug, right? As long as you had that one, you had everybody else. Going through seminary, basically the way it worked is I took care of all the schoolwork and Jay took care of all the social life. And so without me, he would still be at Beeson Divinity School. And without him, I would have never have left my apartment the entire time I was down there. My favorite Jay story, it's a minor story. It's not that funny because let's face it, if your pastor has funny seminary stories, he's probably not your pastor. And so, but one of my favorite stories is Jay and I, we used to talk every day. Now it's just 3 times a week. We're kind of breaking up a little bit. But matter of fact, whenever I left Birmingham, because we went to Johnny Ray's every Thursday, whenever I left Birmingham and went to Fort Smith to pastor, the next week, Jay went in, and the waitress came up and said, "Where's your boyfriend?" So isn't that nice? That probably didn't come up in the interview process, did it? So I'm in Fort Smith, Jay's still in Birmingham, and I'm driving into work. This is before we had kids, and I'm driving into work, and I'm not paying attention, talking to Jay, having fun, going a little bit too fast. I come down the hill, and as I'm coming down, I see a cop, and I see I'm going too fast, and I tap on the brakes. I pass the cop. The cop pulls out, but turns the other way. And so he and I are having a conversation. I said, "Oh my goodness, oh no, oh, thank goodness." And he goes, "What?" And I said, "I was just going too fast. I passed the cop." I said, "There's no better feeling than whenever you pass a cop and he goes the other way, is it?" He goes, "Hey, I gotta go." I said, "Why?" He said, "I'm getting pulled over." That typifies our friendship right there, right? That's kind of who we are and what we're all about. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm a person that believes very deeply in marriage. I come from a broken home. My parents divorced whenever I was very little. They actually remarried. So they divorced whenever I was 4 or 5. They were divorced for a couple years. They remarried. And so they were together the whole time, kind of elementary school, junior high, and high school. And then while I was in college, they divorced again. And so having experienced that pain as a small child, having dealt with that pain also as an adult, and still living with the consequences of what a broken marriage does. There in Fort Smith, we're multi-site, and so my mom goes to our church in Fort Smith, and we have one at another little town across the river. My dad and his wife go there, and then we have one in another location. My sister and her husband goes there, and so our family's kind of spread out. But as an adult, I can still experience and still live with those experiences of what it means to live in the midst of brokenness. And they're great parents. They've done a great job. They love me. They've worked well with one another. But I still, on nearly a weekly basis, still deal with the consequences and the ramifications of some decisions that they made long ago and how their marriage didn't make it. And why exactly that happened and how all that came about isn't really important to me. It's something that they have to deal with, something they have to look at. But I know the consequences that are there. My mom lives next door, and the last couple of weeks she kind of had a bad back, and so I've been taking care of her a little bit. And the whole time I'm taking care of her, I'm thinking, man, this should be my dad's job, right? He should be there, kind of taking care of it in some way. So I think in part that my passion toward marriage comes from that. It comes in part from the pain. But in another place, it comes from a sense of extreme depth of gratitude of what's going on. Several years ago, I started a blog, a website, and I started writing. And I never really talked about marriage very much. For Jenny and I, the first 10 years that we were married, I knew it was very good. Matter of fact, it was so good, I almost felt wrong talking about it because I was afraid that maybe we were still too new into what marriage is all about to really have any authority about it whatsoever. And I also didn't want to talk about it in a way that would make other people feel jealous, because that would not be my intent at all. But a couple weeks into having a website and writing and drawing an audience, I wrote about marriage, and I saw a huge response back from that. So much so that I told Jenny, hey, I'm going to have to start writing about this on a weekly basis. And so every Wednesday for the last 3 years, I've written about marriage. And then some days beyond that, I write about it as well. And that's where the majority of the audience has kind of been drawn to, because I think it is a desire within all of us to have a satisfying, healthy, lasting love. I think that's a desire that we all have. And we're looking for tools and resources in which we can make that happen. And I honestly believe, I truly believe tonight, not because of the material that we have, although I believe in the material and I've seen it change lives. I honestly believe that the next 2 days can dramatically transform your marriage. I have no doubt about it. If you will come in with an open heart, an open mind, an open concept, not come in a defensive kind of mode, not come in thinking, well, I'm going to be under attack here, because you're not going to be under attack in any way whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I would say both men and women equally are going to be uncomfortable at different moments throughout the next couple of days. So you're not going to be under attack in any way. But if you will come in with an open mindset of thinking how you can change yourself, not how you can change your spouse, not what he needs to do or she needs to do, but how you can change yourself. I have no doubt that your relationship can dramatically change. I did bring my wife tonight just to show that this isn't made up, right? I feel like, right? It'd be kind of creepy, like this guy just walking in talking about marriage. And so Jenny is here. Jenny, on our first date, told me that she would never date somebody younger than her, marry somebody younger than her. She would never move for a man, and she would never marry a preacher. And that worked out real well for her. And so after she moved for me to Birmingham, and after she moved for me back to Fort Smith, and I became a pastor there, and since she is older than me, those three things went away very quickly. We have 2 kids, Ella, who is 10. Ella has Down syndrome, and so that offers some unique challenges there. You know, everybody talks about kids with Down syndrome. They're the most loving children ever, and Ella is loving. She'll also punch you in the face. And so the idea that she's the most loving child ever, whenever we hear that, Jenny and I just kind of laugh and say, yeah, maybe some are, but Ella is not. Ella is as stubborn as anything in the world. Maybe the most stubborn child I've ever seen apart from my sister, and so it might be genetic for her. But as stubborn as can possibly be. I'll never forget, one day I was picking her up from preschool, and the teacher came to me before I picked her up and said, hey, Kevin, I just have to warn you, Ella kicked one of her teachers today. I said, okay, I'll take care of that whenever I get home. And so we went home, and I didn't bring it up then. And whenever we got home, I kind of sat her down, and I finally said, Ella, did you kick one of your teachers today? And she said, no, Daddy, I didn't. And I said, well, Ella, go to timeout. You're lying to Daddy. And so she went to timeout. And so I left her there for a couple of minutes, and finally time was up. And so I called her out, and I said, Ella, did you kick one of your teachers today? And she said, no, Daddy, I didn't. So we'll go back to timeout. So she goes back to timeout, and by this time she's kind of frustrated about what's going on. So she comes back out, she's crying at this point, and I said, Ella, did you kick one of your teachers? She said, no, Daddy, I didn't. I kicked both of them. Very well. That's fair, right? Ella one night was in timeout. You see the pattern. And Ella was in timeout one night right before dinner time. And she was very frustrated that I had placed her there because she was hungry and she wanted to eat. And I said, no, you can't eat until you go to timeout. So she went for 2 minutes and she came back out. And so she sat down. I said, Ella, will you lead us in prayer? She said, yes, I will. And she said, dear God, thank you for mommy, not daddy. Amen. So that's Ella, right? That's Ella. And then we have Silas. He's 8, or about to be 8, and just a great kid, very verbal. He's not any smarter than anybody else, but he's just extremely verbal, which makes him just unbelievably funny in so many ways. I'll never forget whenever we were potty training him. I have an office there at the house, and so one Friday he was home with me, and so I went and I sat down at my desk, and it was wet underneath it. And I just had on socks, and it was wet, and I'm like, why is this wet? And so I yelled out, hey, Silas, why is it wet underneath my desk? And he goes, I don't know, Daddy. I didn't pee there. Thanks, Silas. That's really kind, really kind. Whenever I do a wedding, I don't have them on tonight, but whenever I do a wedding, I wear 2 rings. It's kind of a form of professional courtesy. That way, if the best man is playing a joke or is just an idiot and has lost the rings, the wedding can still go on, and I can still make it back in time for the end of the football game, right? And so on my left hand is a ring my wife gave me whenever we were married 15 coming on 16 years ago. We placed rings on the fingers of one another and repeated these vows, made great promises to each other at that time. I'll never forget. I don't know why it is. I think Jay's ear is bigger than mine. I don't know why it is the case, but whenever she placed that ring on my finger that day, the thought just hit me that every time I touch this ring, I'm going to think about her, and I do. Even to this day, I think about her. I could be maybe there at the church and a church member calls and they're irate about something that happened on the baseball field or something that doesn't matter at all. I know that doesn't happen here. And so if I just emotionally need to go to a different place, I can touch the ring and think about her, right? Whenever I'm doing weddings and I'm marrying the couple in front of me, I can touch the ring and just remember what it was like, what those feelings are like. Now, on my right hand, a ring I don't have with me today is a ring that I wear. And when my grandparents were married so long ago, my grandparents on my dad's side, whenever they were married so long ago, my grandfather was a painter for the school district. So he had practically no money whatsoever. And he had nothing to give my grandmother. And so during that first year of marriage, he privately saved up as much money as he possibly could. And on their first anniversary, he bought her a very simple bracelet and a set of earrings. It was a very meaningful gift from him. They were married for 50 years. A great story. It wasn't their first marriage by any means, but it shows how God can redeem so many things. And this man was my dad's father. He was my grandfather, although not by blood, but by reality and by relationship. And so whenever my grandmother died, whenever I was in 8th grade, my grandfather melted down those earrings and that bracelet into a ring, and he wore it every day he was alive after that. He died my senior year in high school, and it just so happened that my picture was in the paper because I was graduating high school and had won some award. And that morning that he died, he began to have a stroke, and he was reading the newspaper. The story is told to me, and his hands began to swell, and he put that newspaper down, and he slipped off that ring. He placed it on my picture, and he died. I don't know how much this ring on my left hand cost. I really don't. I don't remember. I think it was maybe $100 if I remember properly. But I know this, every single day that passes, this ring becomes more meaningful to me. Because this ring that I wear on my left hand is a reminder of our love that Jenny and I have for one another, the experiences, the times that we spent together. The ring I wear on my right hand, I don't know how much it costs either. I never have asked, are the diamonds real or not? Are the little rubies in there real or not? I don't know, but I do know this. If you wanted to ever pawn it, you'd have to kill me first, right? Because that ring that I wear whenever I do weddings is a reminder that I come from a legacy of love. When my grandparents on my mom's side, they used to live next door to me. Whenever they died, they had been married for 70 years. They didn't have a ton of stuff by any means. And yet because of retirement, because of just frugal living, whenever they died, they were as rich as they had ever been, right? And everybody began to divide up their stuff, and they had done a great job. I'm the only grandson. There were 3 granddaughters, and so every year Papaw had bought Mamaw jewelry every single year for the last 20 years, and so they were dividing up all the stuff, and everything was pretty much divided, and I didn't have anything, and that was fine. And then somebody said, "Hey, Kevin, what do you want?" And I said, "I want their wedding rings." Well, how valuable were they? They were probably $50 if you wanted to pawn them. But they were once again another reminder to me that I come from a legacy of love. You know what my prayer is? My prayer is that many, many years from now, when Jenny and I are gone, and our heirs are trying to divide everything up, I hope there's a lot of stuff, right? I hope there is. I hope there's money. I hope there's houses. I hope there's a lot of stuff we don't have right now, right? But I hope that what my son and my daughter want more than anything is some token of memory, some memento about the relationship that Jenny and I have, so that they will know that they always came from a legacy of love. That's what we're building here tonight. Every single couple in this room is living between 2 rings. If you're married already, then you have placed a ring on a left finger, and you have made a tremendous amount of promises, and you have received promises back to you. That commitment has been made, and it's there. But at the same time, you are building a legacy. There's a future that is out there that one day this relationship will end, and it will be remembered for some way, either for good or for bad. It will be remembered for some way. And what you want, what your desire is to build such a legacy that your children, that your grandchildren, that this community looks toward you as the couple that they want to emulate. And what amazes me is this: no matter where you are, no matter what your past has been, no matter what has happened to you, no matter how bad maybe your marriage has been to this point, if from this moment on you will do the work necessary, and if God is gracious to you, giving you enough time to build what you want to build, every single person in this room, no matter who they're married to right now, can create a marriage and have a relationship that is not just soul satisfying to you, although it can be that, but it can literally become a legacy that can transform communities, that can change families. We'll talk about this later in this week, and this is an issue of the gospel. Now, I do a lot of marriage conferences that are outside of churches, and so I can't bring this up, but inside this place, I can bring up this good news. This is also about the gospel. Whenever God wanted to illustrate what the gospel is like, in part, one of the illustrations that he used was marriage. In the same way that Christ loves the church, so too you and I, our husbands, are supposed to love our wives, and wives are supposed to love our husbands back. And that relationship, the uniqueness of that relationship, is now supposed to be such a bold expression to this world that they begin to ask, what is that about? Where does that come from? Where's the foundation of that? And from that, they can begin to see what the gospel of Jesus Christ is all about, the love that he has for us. Marriage is not something that we can play around with. No matter what society does, no matter how our culture changes it, no matter the temptation that we might have to now think that it doesn't matter and it's a private matter, it's just between me and him and nothing else matters, the gospel now illustrates to us that marriage is vital not only to us, not only to the community, it's vital to the church, it's vital to the kingdom itself. It is God's call upon your life, if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, to work on your marriage, to nourish that marriage, and to make that the best relationship it can possibly be. Not perfect, but the best it can possibly be. And so that's what we want to do tonight. And I have some handouts here just to kind of keep our attention as best we possibly can. And we're going to start out with just one concept that to me, will define these next 2 days. And by the way, tomorrow we're going to talk about sex. I do that last just so you'll come back. And it's just, let's just face it. It's going to be difficult tomorrow morning whenever you wake up. It's going to be easy to sleep in and all of that. But we're going to talk about sex tomorrow. We might talk about it in a way that you're not used to in church. Jenny's asking if she can skip tomorrow's session because she really doesn't want to be in the room while her husband talks about sex. But we're going to talk about it in a very, very meaningful way. So I hope you do come back tomorrow. But tonight we want to start with just this one concept. If we can define marriage in one word, what makes a successful marriage? I think for me, it all narrows down to this one word: intention. A healthy marriage begins with intention, not love, although love's very important. I don't doubt that. Not commitment, although commitment is very important, but intention. For you to have something successful in life, for you to achieve what it is that you want to achieve, good things rarely happen by accident. We rarely drift into something good. We rarely just happen to wander in to something that's successful, that's something that's useful. If you've been successful in your life, chances are it's because you put a plan together of how to become successful. It's because you worked hard. It's because you had a goal and you set your eyes toward the goal and everything went toward that. When Jenny and I left Fort Smith this morning, we didn't just happen into Nashville or Nolensville. Do y'all call this Nashville or Nolensville? How does that work? Nolensville? Okay. Was I offensive by saying Nashville? Okay. I'm just making sure, right? You never know. We didn't just happen to this place. We had a destination in mind, a destination in point. And where we were going now defined everything that we did. And we still had to do other things. Jenny was working in the car and I was driving. We still had to stop and eat, and you had to get gas for the car. And so we were still doing these other things. But everything that we did today was defined in part by the idea that we needed to be here tonight. And so it influenced how we got up this morning, what time we got up, how we were rushing the kids around, all the work that we had to do. It influenced which direction we turned whenever we got on the interstate. It influenced everything that we did today was influenced by the destination of us being here tonight. This happened on purpose. We're here tonight on purpose. If you want to have a successful marriage, you have to have an intention of having that. You're not just going to happen into it. You're not just going to luck into it. You're not just going to drift into something that's good, something that's meaningful, something that brings glory and honor to God. That doesn't happen by accident. From the very get-go, you have to set your heart and your mind and your soul into an intention that this is now something we're going to work toward. This is something we desire. It's something we have purposed within our own heart. It is now our hope. It is our might. It is our work. It is our life's calling. It is our intention now to build a successful relationship. Most marriages fail, not because of money, Not because of sex, not because of irreconcilable differences, and not because of an affair that happens within the relationship, not because of some tragedy that takes place. Most marriages fail because of a lack of intention. They do not make the choices to have a healthy marriage. They do not set their mind and their heart and their goal into achieving that. Instead, they simply say, I do, and then they don't do anything. And eventually they drift apart. And sometimes it happens in dramatic ways. I've seen it. I've had the couple sitting there on my couch, and I've heard her say, I've been cheating on you. I've had him sitting right there the first time that he says, I want a divorce. I've watched people's world just be shattered. And nobody ever intends to be there. I marry a lot of people. And I can't think of a single time in which I married somebody and they had intended in their mind for this relationship not to make it. It doesn't work that way. So how do they end up there? I mean, these are good people too. I mean, these are people of our church, within our community. These are not evil people. There are evil people out there, I get that, but these are good people. People that I love, people that at one point were madly in love with each other, and they would have never, in their right mind, had thought to themselves that I want to literally crush this other person. And yet they get to the point where they're seated on my couch, and it's over. And there's nothing any of us can do about it, to be honest with you. How do they get there? They get there because they slowly drift there. Her heart slowly dies. His heart slowly wanders. And without any intention and purpose of what they're trying to accomplish, Satan is able to allow them to wander into these foreign places until the next thing you know, it's all over. Intention is so important, and that is the word that I want you to take away with from this weekend. And if you get nothing else, as long as you get that word and you walk out of here and develop a plan of how to intentionally build the marriage and the relationship that you want, your marriage can forever change. Now, I think generally speaking, there are three threats to intention. There are three reasons that people do not have intention within their marriage. And the first one is a laziness that's born of fear. It's a laziness that's born of fear. And so these are the people who just won't do the work. I see it all the time as couples are in my office and I lay out, hey, here's the game plan of what y'all need to do. And generally speaking, I'm not a counselor. I see myself kind of as a triage nurse, right? They'll show up with gaping wounds within their marriage, and I'll look at them and I'll diagnose them and I'll try to get them in to see the specialist. But until they can see a specialist, I'll give them a few assignments. Hey, here's the way to kind of handle this until you can get in to see the marriage counselor or whatever. And I'll call back the next couple of days and I'll talk to them and say, all right, hey, I gave you 3 things to do. How'd that go? Well, this one thing, it went pretty well, and I see why you said that, and this other thing we can just kind of try, and I'll say, well, what about the third thing? Well, we didn't do that. Well, why didn't you do that? Well, we just didn't think it was necessary. Oh, you're the expert. I see. How's that worked for you so far? Right? It's a laziness and just a lack of willingness to now actually put in the effort. But notice it's a laziness that's born of fear. It's not just that these are lazy people. Very few people are actually just lazy just in general. Laziness generally is a reflection of fear. What it is they don't want to do the work because they don't want to have their sin-filled heart revealed. They don't want to go there emotionally into these places that maybe have caused them pain. And so they're afraid of having an honest conversation with their spouse of what that might reveal about them or what that might do or what they might say in that moment. They're not willing to do the homework because it might cost them too much. And so because they're afraid of those things, it expresses itself in a laziness. If you have a spouse who is unwilling to do the work of marriage, they're afraid of something. They're not just lazy. They're afraid of something. And if you can begin to create a culture of safety for them, if they can have the courage to choose what is good and right over what they're afraid of, then you got a chance. But at least recognize if you're not willing to do the work that's a sign of your own fear. The second is the deception of a soulmate. I almost preached on this on Sunday, but I chose to go a different direction. But It's Valentine's Day, and so, you get the little candy, you are my soulmate. You get the Coca-Cola, you are my soulmate. It's a cute thought, right? It's a cute thought. But the idea of a soulmate comes from Greek mythology. And the idea back in Greek mythology was the concept that the gods looked down on humanity and what they were afraid of us. They were afraid that we might rise up and overtake them. And humanity to them had 4 arms and 4 legs. And so in a defense mechanism, the gods reached down and broke humanity in half into having just 2 arms and 2 legs and separated us. And the idea comes from that, the concept comes from that we would spend the rest of our lives trying to look for our better half, trying to look for our soulmate, and that would then distract us from attacking the gods. The concept of a soulmate comes from Greek mythology, not the New Testament. And nowhere in the Bible does the New Testament say that there was one person created specifically for you, and your task now is to spend your time on earth finding that exact one person. Just not there. Instead, the concept in the New Testament is that God basically says, you can marry whoever you want within some basic guardrails of what that looks like. You choose, and now he gives some advice of what that should look like and tries to prevent us from making a bad choice. But you choose, and then whomever you choose, you do everything in your power to make that relationship good. And yet you and I, if we're not careful, we can be raised in this culture in believing that there is a soulmate, that there's somebody that's created just for us, that is a perfect fit for us. And whenever somebody enters into a relationship with that mindset, whenever they walk this aisle and they get married here and think, this person was created specifically for me, and 2 weeks later they have their first fight, what's their first thought? I married the wrong person. This person isn't created for me. Because clearly if this person was made just for me, then it would be perfect. It would be easy. It would be natural. And yet marriage is anything but perfect and easy and natural. And yet if you believe in a soulmate, if you're not very careful, that can prevent you from having intention within your marriage. The reality is your spouse was not made specifically for you. Jenny could be happily married to 1,000 other guys. I have no doubt about that. She is a wife that many people would long for. Easy to get along with, easy to work with, very giving, very generous, very even keel and well thought out. She could have a happy marriage. Don't get ideas, but she could have a happy marriage with a lot of people, right? I could have a happy marriage with a few other people, right? Not many. Because I'm not as easy to live with, as easy to deal with, as easy to work with. But it's not just us. She's not my soulmate. Happy Valentine's Day. Put that on the card. She's not. You know what she is? She's my wife. And instead of being forced to love her, think about the soulmate concept. The soulmate says, I didn't choose her. The soulmate says, now the gods chose her and I have no choice. It's a force. It's something that's been forced upon us. That's not love. Love here is, of all the people she could have married, she chose me. Of the few people I could have married, I chose her. That should honor us. That should now elevate us. But now we know this isn't going to be perfect. Mistakes are supposed to happen. There's supposed to be frustrations and rubs and tensions that are there. And the good news of the gospel is that we know that God so often transforms our hearts, not through the easy times, but the hard times. God so often transforms our hearts, not through those things that seemingly come natural, but instead the difficulties, the things we have to fix, we have to work through, we have to figure out. If you fall for the soulmate deception, then chances are you're not being intentional in a relationship. And yet if you'll get into the reality of what the gospel says about husbands and wives and God's creative design, then you'll see it is his purpose now that you get to choose whomever you want, male than female. You get to choose then, but then you have to have an intention about it. The third, I think, great deception that we got to be careful about is the thought that marriage is a flip of a coin. I heard it yesterday. Yesterday I was doing a radio show there in Fort Smith for Valentine's weekend, and the person interviewing me, he's a good friend, and just kind of in the middle of the interview, he says, well, Kevin, with 50% of all marriages ending in divorce, what's really the point of this whole thing? And I said, well, buddy, my friend, 50% of all marriages don't end in divorce. And he said, what? I said, that's a myth. It doesn't happen that way. I said, the way that stat comes up is that like 1 year, they looked at the number of total marriages and the total number of divorces, and from that they got a 50% rating. But I've actually, now this is an Arkansas thing, so don't make fun of me because you're Tennessee, so you're not going to be that much better, right? I've actually had in our church a husband and wife divorce in January because he's having an affair. And he remarries the other person around Easter. And those things rarely last, but they normally last longer than this one. And they were divorced by December. Now, using that as anecdotal evidence, you could say in Arkansas, the divorce rate is 200%. 2 divorces, 1 marriage, right? The divorce rate is not 50%. The divorce rate, generally speaking, for first-time marriages today is right around 30%. But did you know? Did you know that if you wait until you're at least 22 to marry, that if you date for at least a year, that if you attend church at least twice a month consistently, do you know that you can drop your divorce rate to about 10%? And yet if we have this concept that 50% of all marriages are ending in divorce, then what's the point of putting in the effort? The work isn't worth it. Because what I'm going to call you to is difficult work. It's hard work, it's daily work, it's time-consuming work. It literally can zap the life of you on a continual basis in the midst of trying to make this thing work. And whenever we look at the amount of work that is required, if we understand that, well, half the time it doesn't work anyway, what's the point? What's the purpose? And yet, if you have the reality and understanding that we can actually shrink our divorce rate to 10% to lower, then what that begins to say is if you do this work, then 90% of the time, there's going to be a huge return on investment for that work. Marriage is not about the flip of a coin. It's about the flip of a will. It's about the flip of your will. Marriage is not the flip of a coin. It's the flip of a will, your will. It's a willingness and a desire now to humble yourself. A willingness now to put the other person before you. In the concept of Philippians, to consider others before you consider your own self. It's a desire now to put the we above the individual me. If you will make that flip in your will, then your marriage can be very successful. One of my favorite kind of business books is the E-Myth Revisited, and the writer there, from a business concept, he uses an illustration that I think is very important and very useful for marriage. And he says whenever a person starts a small business, the mistake that they tend to make in starting that small business is all they do is they work in the business and not on the business. And if they can ever separate themselves and begin to work on the business and not just in it, then they can become much more successful. I think that's true for marriage as well. We must work both in the marriage and on the marriage. And so working within the marriage is what you've done today. It's the idea of just making life work. Part of that is actually going off to work, making a living, making money, being able to buy groceries, being able to have a place to live. If you have kids, it's the idea of who's going to take them to school and how their lunch is going to get made, and who's going to do the homework, and how you're going to pick them up, and how you're going to take them to the after-school activities, who's going to take care of them tonight, and how are you going to get here tonight. And the arrangements of all how that happens, that is working in marriage. We have to do that every single day of our lives. We have to work in marriage. But to have a successful marriage, there has to be these moments in which you take time to work on the marriage. That's what you're doing tonight. That's what this is. A marriage night, a retreat weekend, that's you working on the marriage. In which you're going to be able to take a step, I'm so afraid I'm going to fall because I'm not used to this stage, in which I take a step back and we actually look at the relationship. Outside of the craziness of what's going on a daily basis, outside of the stress and the hassle of the routine, we take a step back and we just ask the big questions. Are you happy? Am I happy? Is this going well? Is there any way I can help you that I'm not? Is there any way you can help me that you're not? Has the workload of this, has it fallen too much on you, or is it too much on me? What are your life dreams? Are we pursuing after that? Are we going the direction we want to be? What path are we on? Forget about where we are right now. Which direction are we going? Are we headed in a good direction or a bad direction? That's the concept now of working on the marriage. of taking a time out and looking at the relationship as its own identity and saying, how is this? Is it good or bad? Far too many couples never do that. Now, I applaud you. You're doing it here tonight. But this isn't going to be enough. Working on the marriage needs to be a routine pattern within your relationship. That there are these times in which you call time out and you step back. Maybe it's just a conversation. Maybe it's a date night in which you go out and you can discuss these kind of big issues. Maybe it's a weekly or a yearly and annually kind of concept of a marriage night like this, or a marriage retreat. For Jenny and I, part of that is built into our yearly vacation. That during that time, we find some alone time in which we don't have the kids with us. And so we try to go somewhere every year, somewhere just the two of us. Today it's Nolensville. It's very romantic on Valentine's Day, right? But we just get to take a break to ask the big questions. Are you too busy? Are you working too hard? Am I not doing enough? What can I do more here of? What can we do more there of? A time to kind of renegotiate the realities of marriage. If you don't ever work on your marriage, then you will actually die in the middle of working in your marriage. And so I applaud you for this, but this has to just be the beginning. There has to come a point where you can get aside and honestly ask the big questions of life and ask, how's this going? A question I would have for you right now, just within your own heart. Don't look at your spouse, don't think about anything, just within your own heart. Which direction is your marriage headed? Is it getting better or worse? Are you happy with where you're headed? Or would you like to modify some things? Change some things? What is it within your relationship that right now just isn't where you want it to be? And let me go beyond that. Which of you is going to have the courage to say it? Which of you is going to now be willing to say, you know what, I've thought about some things and here's what I think we need to work on. Maybe I'm happy about some things, but there are a few things that I'm not happy about. Or maybe I'm afraid. Maybe I'm afraid that we're going completely the wrong direction. And if that's you tonight, and there's couples in this room, I have no doubt about it. There are couples in this room who right now, at least one of the spouses, if not both, is thinking to themselves, we're going the wrong way. And if this continues left unchecked, if this continues, then at minimum, we're going to end up with a bad relationship. At maximum, it's going to be over. If that's you tonight, then at some point in this weekend, you need to have the courage to look your spouse in the eye and say, I love you, but I don't like where we're headed. We need help. Jay will have names of counselors. Don't go see Jay. Don't go see a pastor. Go see a professional. I mean, Jay will pray for you. You can go see Jay to start with, but Jay doesn't know what he's doing either, right? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a professional counselor. If you come see me, I'm going to listen to you, I'm going to help you, and then I'm going to get you to professional. But you'll have a list of counselors. There's probably, my guess is about 20% of the couples in here tonight need to have a counseling session within the next 2 weeks. That's my guess. That's not saying that your marriage is done. That's not even saying that your marriage is bad. What that is saying is there's at least one area within your relationship in which you're going the wrong direction, and you don't have the skills to figure it out. You don't have the skills to negotiate between yourselves how to make that better, and you now need an outside person looking in to say, here's what we need to do. Who's going to have the courage to do it? There at the bottom of page 1, I put in there a scripture just to make us feel holy. But whenever I think about marriage, I go back to this Genesis 2 concept. So this is before sin entered the world. Marriage is God's design. It's his purpose. There was an intent that was actually there. And then from this passage, I think we're going to pick up what I think is the basic structure of a healthy marriage and the structure that's going to lead us for the next couple of days. So let me just read a couple of things here. And let's just kind of walk through this text and then we'll go from there. So this is Genesis 2. Then the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. Remember, that's very striking in his creative order. All along, he's been talking about how things were so good. He created it, and now he's saying, there's one part here that's not as good as I want it to be. So I will make him a helper. So notice that you might just circle that word helper there. I will make him a helper, but a helper is unique because that helper is fit for him. Circle the word fit. So you got helper and fit. Now out of the ground the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. So you can see now there's a parade of animals now basically coming before Adam, right? And God is revealing to Adam all the creation and empowering Adam to now name these things. There's a power that's there. And the man gave name to all the livestock and all the birds of the heaven and all the beasts of the field. Now notice what he gave name to were a lot of the very tools that Adam and man himself would now use to cultivate the earth. But for Adam, there was not found a helper, here it comes again, helper fit for him. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man. And while he slept, he took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. And then the man said, "This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall be called one flesh." And the man and the wife were both naked. Circle the word naked, because how can we not circle the word naked? Not a single amen from a man in the room. And they were not ashamed. Now I think from this text we get a basic structure of what it means to be a spouse. A basic structure of what marriage is all about. And right there within that text, I think you see the three basic roles that you're supposed to play as a husband or a wife. These basically, you are married to three people, but it's just one person that now plays these three roles. And the three roles that we now see right there, I think in the text, is friend, partner, and lover. Those are your three tasks. You're to be a friend, a partner, and a lover. The idea of helper shows the partner concept. Adam and Eve were placed in the garden. They were given a task. They had a job to accomplish. Long before sin entered the world, work is not post-sin, work is before sin. And so work is part of our design, what God has created us to do. And when God looked down the garden and the task that he was about to give Adam, what he basically said to Adam is, hey, you can't do this by yourself. You need a helper. You need a partner. You need somebody to come alongside of you that's going to assist you in this task. And then he paraded all the animals in front of Adam. All these animals, many of the animals which Adam would now use to carry out that task. And yet none of those helpers, while they could help, none of those helpers were fit for him. They weren't a match for him. They were useful. They could play useful roles. They would have useful relationships. But it was not the perfect fit that God was looking for, because God didn't want Adam just to have a partner. He also wanted that person to be a friend, and for Adam to have an equal relationship that is there. And then there at the end of the text, we can see the nature of that relationship has the concept of what it means to be a lover. That intimacy is actually now there between this partner and this friend. And so whenever I think about my task, my role, what God expects me to be for Jenny, I think it's God's expectation upon me to play all three of those roles. And in a healthy relationship, I think both spouses are playing all three of those roles for one another, making that relationship extremely unique. Think about it in this way. Think about these two chairs, now symbolizing husband and wife. This is why we don't let people sit on the front row, because we need these chairs. You've done a great job here. It's obedience that has put you on the back row. Think about the task here now, the image that we get about a healthy marriage. First of all, they're friends. We are friends. And as friends, we go through life side by side. That's what a friendship is all about, right? We go through life side by side, which means she's not ahead of me. She's not behind me. She's right here at my side. We are equally ignorant about life. It's one of my favorite things about marrying a young couple. Let's say they're 23 and they're just out of college and they've never been married before, and they found one another. They're excited about it. As I'm doing the wedding ceremony, I always say, you know what? I'm convinced of two things right now. Two things that I know. I know that you love each other deeply. And yeah, absolutely. Just love each other so deeply. Yeah, absolutely. And then I say, and I'm also convinced you have no clue what you're doing. And their head snaps at me. And I say, I'm serious. You're clueless. But that's the beauty of it. You're clueless together. And now I'm about to pronounce you husband and wife, and you're going to walk out of here, and your task is now to figure it out together. But it's not that he knows and she doesn't. It's not that she knows and he doesn't. It's that you both don't know, but you get to figure it out together. That's what marriage is all about. That we always have somebody right beside us through life, a friend. We're never alone. They're always right there. You're supposed to be your spouse's friend, walking beside them. As life is coming at us, we are hand in hand attacking it together. And so even in our worst, even in our moments in which we have no clue what we're doing, neither does she. But we're in this together and we're going to figure it out. Having a friend means that you always have somebody by your side. But that's not it. That's not just the only thing. Also, marriage is about a partnership, which now means I always have somebody who has my back. The task that God has given us is so much. And as a matter of fact, just the older you get, the more it can become. And so we're supposed to go out and pursue after this world and do great things. And there are threats out there. We live in a dangerous world. And so there are threats out there, which means we have to constantly be scanning the horizon for the dangers that are out there, trying to protect one another. But notice what marriage does. It gives us a partner, which means I have somebody that can take at least half the workload. And so instead of me having to constantly scan the entire horizon at every moment, instead I can say to Jenny, you take that half, I'll get this half. And the next thing you know, I become much more capable because I have a partner who has my back, and I know if there's any threat coming after me, she's going to let me know about it. So I can turn around and face it, or she's going to take care of it herself, right? And so I always, being married, having a partner, I always have somebody who has my back. You know, we live in this scary and dangerous world. How great is it to know that you always have somebody watching out for you? But do you know what? In a lot of marriages, the person who is supposed to have your back is the one person you can't trust. It's the very person you're paranoid about them stabbing you in the back. When this relationship goes wrong, do you see how dangerous it is? Because God's intention here, I think, is that the marriage relationship is supposed to give us a place of safety, a place of security. And the very person that is supposed to be protecting me, if this relationship goes bad, they become the main threat. The most likely person to kill you is your spouse. Marry wisely. Happy Valentine's Day again. We need to make some Valentine's Day cards. The most likely person to kill you is your spouse. Happy Valentine's Day. But think about when this is right. You always have somebody who's got your back, loves you, cares for you, is trying to protect you. What a powerful image that is, especially in this day. But that's not it. It's not just that. Not only are we side by side, not only are we back to back, but then marriage is then a face-to-face reality. There's an intimacy that's here, unlike any other relationship. Your spouse sees you in a way that nobody else has ever seen you. Literally, that's supposed to be literally to some extent. But then beyond that, the emotional vulnerability that's there. This is scary. We're going to look at this tomorrow. This is why sex is so difficult. Because when shame entered the world, soon after this story, when shame entered the world, Adam and Eve, this relationship, this intimate relationship of them being naked and having no shame immediately changed. And they begin to clothe themselves and to blame one another. This is a scary thing. This, to me, in part, is why premarital sex is forbidden. Because what God is saying is, do not reveal the vulnerability of your own heart to somebody who is not willing to die for you. Make him do far more than just buy you dinner. Make him commit his life to you. And then begin to reveal who you actually are. And yet notice this when this is good. When this is good, I have somebody that sees me. Sees me. Not just sees me in the role that I play. Not just sees the caricature, whether it be good or bad, of what other people think of me. But she sees me, all of me. And she's chosen to love me anyway. Now, there are things that she sees that she doesn't like, right? Like there are negative things within my own life, and she prays that I would change those things, no doubt. But I am known. And one of humanity's greatest fears is that we will be known but not loved. And yet when marriage is right, we are known, we are seen and loved. And there's such a power in that moment when this is right. There is such a power in that moment that it binds us greatly. Whenever I read Genesis chapter 2, I see 3 roles. We are a friend, and so we are always side by side through life. We are partners, which means somebody always has our back and we are protected. And we are lovers, which means we are seen completely, known, and yet loved anyway. That is your task. That is your task. If you have said, I do, that is your task. Now live that out with your spouse. Now, I know many of you had dinner right before we came. I'm good to go, but I'm not convinced you are. And so here's what I want to do. I want us to take just maybe a 5-minute break. That way, if you need to use the restroom, you can. We can kind of recalibrate. Let's come back at 8:10, and we'll go from there.